Dad, remember that gymnastics routine from yesterday? The one where the bride stripped off all her clothes. The atmosphere in the wedding reception hall went dead silent at my daughter's words. Just as the bride was about to read a letter to her parents, 5-year-old Tina blurted it out loud. The bride's face turned to stone, and Luke, who was holding Tina on his lap, looked like he'd seen a ghost. As the eyes of everyone in the hall turned towards our table, Tina continued. Why was she undressed if it wasn't bath time? You'll catch a cold if you undress anywhere other than the bathroom. To a child, it might be an innocent question, but adults instantly understand the implication. The hall couldn't settle down, the murmur was still there. Luke took Tina outside, and the female host, although shaken, tried to continue the ceremony. Encouraged by the host, the bride tried to resume reading her letter, but her voice was clearly trembling. Usually, you'd hear sniffling and see tears of emotion filling the hall. But not a sound could be heard. Tina's comment had turned what should have been a joyous event into complete chaos. I'm Bianca, 33 years old, and I live with my husband Luke and our 5-year-old daughter, Tina. Luke has an older brother, James, who got married a bit late, at 40, to a much younger woman who's 28. Finally, they decided to tie the knot. At the family meeting about the engagement, James seemed utterly smitten with his fiancée. It was really heartwarming to see. Who could have thought that attending James's wedding as a family of 3 would lead to such a disaster? Naturally, after the wedding reception ended, the bridal suite turned into a scene of chaos. I immediately confronted Luke. What was that all about? That's just Tina being Tina. Don't take it seriously. Our kid just disrupted the whole ceremony. Of course I'm rattled. And it's your lack of discipline that led to this. You need to teach her better manners. Luke then quickly handed Tina over to me and left in a hurry. It felt like he was running away from me. We were staying at Luke's parents' house the night before the wedding because it took place at a hotel near his hometown, and we live far away. His parents are genuinely kind people. They always have my back. Unlike some of my friends who dislike going to their in-laws, I've never felt uncomfortable there. That's why we had planned to take a week-long vacation around the time of the wedding and relax at Luke's parents' house before heading home. Even though both James and my sister-in-law Ashley are planning on living in that house, it's spacious enough to accommodate us comfortably. Tina, who's usually told not to run around in our cramped apartment, seemed excited and restless, walking all over the house to explore. Come to think of it, I recall Luke and Ashley being absent for a bit last night when we were having a good time drinking with James and parents-in-law. Mom, Dad's playing around. Tina wants to join in too. I feel like Tina did say something like that. Who would have thought that what she was referring to was Luke and Ashley cheating? In the bridal suite, James and Ashley spent a long time talking. Eventually, we decided to head to the after-party where our friends were waiting. As for Tina and me, we ended up going back to my parents-in-law's house. If what Tina said is true, I am so sorry. While returning from the hall, my mother-in-law Grace kept apologizing to me, looking genuinely regretful. Please, stop. Luke is the one who's at fault here. Grace, you've done nothing wrong. It's my fault for not properly teaching him how to treat women. No family could possibly teach that level of decency. When we arrived at the parents-in-law's home, Luke was already back, sitting alone, watching TV and drinking beer. Standing tall, Grace broke the ice. So, what kind of gymnastics are we talking about? I'd love to see it. That's not it. I was just asking my future Ashley to look after my brother. What a considerate younger brother you are. But I can't imagine Tina lying. She's only 5 years old, and she often says strange things. Tina is my granddaughter, and she's very bright. So you're taking the word of a bad girl over your own son? Don't you dare call my precious granddaughter a bad girl. Why are you getting mad? Both Grace and I have our suspicions about Luke. But we can't really push it further based solely on the word of a 5-year-old. Luke won't admit anything. He just went into a sulk and locked himself in his room. 2 days after the wedding, both Grace and I kept an eye on Luke, but he didn't do anything suspicious. Well, James and Ashley went off on their honeymoon, so it's not like he had a chance to be suspicious anyway. Meanwhile, Tina, ever the little explorer around the house, found something unbelievable. Mommy, what does this say? Tina can't read cursive yet. You shouldn't be going through Grandma and Grandpa's stuff. No, it's not like that. I found this in Dad's bag. Is it a letter? Tina's written to her friends at preschool before. Let me see. Shockingly, it was a letter from Ashley to Luke. No, calling it a letter doesn't quite do it justice. It was undeniably a love letter. The letter read, Dear Luke. The day before the wedding was so exciting, wasn't it? We have to be cautious for a while since we're being watched at home. But we'll definitely have a chance, so don't give up. You're the only one I love, Luke. The reason I married an older man is so I could be with you. Come get me soon. I couldn't let myself break down in front of Tina, so I forced myself to keep my composure. This is a work-related letter, so Mom will take care of it, okay? Okay. Tina replied cheerfully, heading off on another household adventure. So Tina wasn't mistaken after all. She really did see what was happening. I calmly took a photo of the letter and placed it back into Luke's bag. Then I went to the kitchen where Grace was making pickles. Grace. Tina found a love letter that Ashley sent to Luke. What? As I showed the photo of the letter I had taken on my phone, Grace made a face. What is this? It's disturbing. This is unfair to James. Why have such a flashy wedding if this is going on? If she didn't love him, why did she marry him? Grace is visibly angry, her face turning red. At this point, I decided to tell Grace something that had been bothering me. Luke said he has to go back alone tomorrow because work suddenly came up, even though he was supposed to be on vacation. Grace looks up at me, as if deep in thought. Doesn't that seem odd? Exactly. Grace and I exchanged glances, both of us seemingly concerned about the same thing. The timing is just too perfect. Plus, his brother and his wife are on their honeymoon in Hawaii. Do you think they're planning to meet up there? I nodded in agreement. I hate to say it, but James is a very kind person who, unfortunately, is a bit naive and easily deceived. There's no doubt in my mind that the two of them plan to have a secret meeting without James noticing. After all the trouble to finally get married, and he ends up with a woman like that. It's even sadder because they seemed so happy. Let's go. With that, Grace suddenly stood up and began washing her hands. All right, start packing for Hawaii. Your father's coming too. What? I was genuinely surprised by Grace's sudden declaration, but she looked at me and smiled, clearly pleased. We're going to expose everything. Do they have any idea how much we spent on that wedding? Just because he's marrying a younger woman, we even chipped in $30,000. This is no joke. We're definitely getting that back. I couldn't help but applaud Grace's determination and immediately started to prepare as well. For some reason, Grace seemed strangely excited. But deep down, I was excited too. Just wait. We'll make them wish they were never born. The next morning, Luke was having breakfast, trying too hard to keep a straight face. It's really a shame you have to work after finally getting some time off. Just relax and enjoy your time. Even though no one was listening, Luke loudly announced his departure and left. In a flurry, we quickly packed our bags. Parents-in-law, Tina, and I left about 2 hours behind them. Luckily, we got the tickets and hotel with no issues. Tina is thrilled, shouting, "Plane! Plane!" We chose a lodging spot a bit away from the hotel where we heard James would be staying, so we wouldn't attract attention. Upon arrival, Grace decided to call James to see how things were going. "How's Hawaii?" Responding to Grace, James's relaxed voice came through the speakerphone. "It's warm and relaxing. We're planning to go to see Life Park Hawaii tomorrow. Look forward to some souvenirs." James seemed to be having a great time but mentioned, "Well, my wife is going out to dinner with a friend who lives in Oahu tonight, so I'll be alone." Hearing that, Grace lifted her gaze and exchanged glances with me. No doubt, Luke and Ashley are probably having a secret meeting tonight. Well, enjoy Hawaii. Grace decided to hang up, perhaps concluding that now was not the time to say anything. It's sad for James, who is in the dark about all this. Who would have thought we'd catch Luke and Ashley on a date as soon as we landed? Though we had valuable information, my emotions were a mess. I wish it were a lie. I wish it were just Ashley's one-sided affection. But Luke had followed her all the way to Hawaii. Ignoring this wasn't an option anymore. After discussing with my parents-in-law, we decided that father-in-law Brian, who could blend in the most, should tail Ashley as she left the hotel for her date tonight. Brian put on a hat and a mask and transformed into an unnoticeable passerby in a second. Way to go, Dad. You're completely unnoticeable. Tina also says, "Grandpa, it suits you." She's delighted. Whether he's being praised or teased, Brian, easily influenced by Grace's words, decided to stake out at a cafe in front of the hotel where James and his group are staying. "Hun, your mission is threefold. 1. Follow Ashley as she leaves the hotel. 2. Confirm she's meeting up with Luke. And 3. Keep an eye on her until she enters and leaves another hotel. Got it?" Brian nodded earnestly at Grace's forceful instructions. Equipped with his high-sensitivity DSLR camera and a big telephoto lens that he'd bought as a hobby, he headed out. We're incredibly grateful to Brian, who willingly took on the task despite the long hours it would entail. Grace, Tina, and I finished dinner and returned to the hotel. After putting Tina to bed, we waited for Brian's return. Surprisingly, Brian didn't come back until 3 in the morning. "Let me sleep for now," he muttered as he crawled into bed, looking exhausted. So, we decided to hear the full story the next morning. The next day, as we looked at the photos Brian had taken while listening to his account, there was irrefutable evidence. True to his love for photography, Brian's shots were incredibly detailed. Even from a distance, you could see the two of them embracing clearly. So, she really is cheating after all. It's a hard truth to accept for James and me, but living a lie in a marriage is not an option. Seeing my downcast mood, Grace asserted, "We should put an end to this difficult time as soon as possible." I couldn't agree more. For the second day, we learned James planned to go to see Life Park Hawaii. We decided to rent a car and follow him there. Inside the park, we left Tina with Brian while Grace and I walked around. Soon enough, we spotted James and his wife. There was James, genuinely interested in the aquarium displays, and Ashley, glued to her phone, showing zero interest in the aquatic life. Just as we were about to approach them, Grace's phone rang. Apparently, Brian had spotted Luke coming out of the restroom. They're probably planning to meet discreetly here as well, without my son noticing. You're probably right. Let's wait for that moment. We kept our distance and waited for Ashley to make a move. Just as expected, within 10 minutes, she left James, who was busy looking at souvenirs, and started walking somewhere. We discreetly followed her into an exhibit area that was less crowded and had fewer visitors. Once she found Luke, she immediately leapt into his arms and hugged him, doing this without even realizing we're watching. What are you thinking? Something inside me broke the moment I witnessed this reality, and I couldn't hold back any longer. I marched up to the embracing couple and pulled them apart. Luke was shocked, his eyes wide open at my sudden appearance. I unleashed several slaps on him right then and there. Ow! Stop it! I honestly don't remember how many times I hit him before Grace stopped me. Grace grabbed Ashley, who tried to escape when we showed up. How dare you deceive my precious son? Sit down on the floor. Frustrated, Luke and Ashley gave in and sat down on the floor. But causing more of a scene would bother other people around us. So, we all moved to the rental car for now. James was already in the car, looking sad. It seemed he'd heard about what happened from Brian. In the minivan, we pushed Luke and Ashley into the farthest back row, while Grace and I sat in the second row to block their exit. When did you start cheating? I'm not cheating or anything. Why are you all even in Hawaii? What about you? Why are you here? I'm here for work. Don't lie. You came chasing after this woman, didn't you? It's a coincidence. Even then, Luke still tried to deceive us. So I confronted him with the evidence photos that Brian had taken. We can see you two were having fun until around 3 a.m. Brian followed you. Luke sighed heavily. Ashley kept her eyes down and said nothing. So, what Tina said during the wedding reception wasn't a lie, was it? You two were exercising the night before the wedding, weren't you? Look, I was in a tough spot too. I was bothered when Ashley came on to me. I told her multiple times that I have a loving wife and daughter, so it can't happen. Right? Just then, Luke started to shift all the blame onto Ashley, who responded with an incredulous, "Huh?" Grabbing Luke, she yelled, "Who was the one saying, 'Leave my brother and be with me'?" "No, I never said that." Luke shot back, and their argument began to heat up. Back and forth they went, arguing about who said what. I didn't come to Hawaii to listen to this nonsense. Finally, I couldn't hold back any longer. Enough! What? I don't care who initiated it. Why can't you just apologize when you've clearly betrayed me and James? I'm the victim here. If you try to dodge responsibility anymore, I'll make your life a living hell. What are you planning to do? Let's just say, I'll make sure everyone in your social and work circle recognizes you as the fool who slept with his brother's wife. What's the point of doing that? Well, if people aren't warned, you might try to make moves on their wives or girlfriends. I would never do that. You've already done it, haven't you? He had no comeback. Luke fell silent. It turns out, during a family dinner that doubled as a meeting to sort things out, Ashley had developed a liking for Luke. Luke didn't mind the attention and continued a casual relationship with her. Bizarrely, Luke even suggested to Ashley, "Why don't you first marry my brother, get a share of his wealth in the divorce, and then marry me?" For some unknown reason, Ashley seemed to go along with it. Unbelievable, to be swayed by these two. Luke, who was supposed to be my husband, now looks utterly repulsive to me. This dirty man is all yours. I don't want him anymore. Ashley, surprisingly pleased with my words, turns to me and smiles. Really? What was all that fighting about just moments ago? But let me tell you, a man like this will definitely do it again. Cheating outside is one thing, but hitting on a family member is just sick. Especially when he falls for a terrible woman like you, there's no cure. Ashley, entirely unfazed by my words, smirks as if she's won. Is that a cry of defeat, I wonder? Well, do enjoy your few months together. Then, even Luke joins in, grabbing Ashley's hand and starting to celebrate. What an incredibly cheerful pair they are. Because of you, I spent $30,000 on a wedding we didn't even need to have. I expect that money back. I'll also be seeking compensation in the divorce proceedings. I expect $20,000 from each of you. Hearing me and Grace's demands, Ashley suddenly shouts, "That's totally unfair!" Luke joins in, saying, "As if we can afford that. If you don't pay, we'll go through lawyers and take this to court. If you two can find happiness under a $70,000 debt, be my guest." This is outrageous! We just loved each other a little. That's precisely the problem. You'll both be held fully responsible for what you did. Just then, James suddenly started moving the rental car. Where do you think you're going? James drove silently, and when he reached a deserted area near the ocean, he took their wallets and cell phones and left them there. I was surprised. I had never seen James this angry before. As the rental car pulled away, "Don't leave us here!" their cries of, "Please, come back!" echoed. "Watch out for snakes and mongoose, okay?" I waved cheerfully as I said this. I wonder how long it would take to walk back to town from here. I hope they make it back safely. Just then, I received a call from Brian. "Tina is looking for you, Bianca." And we decided to head back to the aquarium. Let's enjoy Hawaii while we're here. Absolutely. We returned to the aquarium. At the large tank, James is holding Tina's hand and both seem engrossed by the sharks. They actually look happy. Better to see these lovely smiles than waste time on fools. Brian's words lifted my spirits. James also appears quite relieved, which is surprising considering he was just betrayed by his new wife. I bet he's hurting inside. I know I am, being betrayed by Luke. But I refuse to shed tears over them. I thought James must feel the same. Later on, James and Ashley's divorce is finalized. Only 5 days had passed since the wedding reception, but James returned all the wedding gifts to the guests. I also finalized my divorce with Luke, and Tina will now be living with me. I ended up getting all the assets in the divorce settlement. We agreed on $400 per month for child support. Luke, ever conscious of what others think, easily agreed when parents-in-law and I, through our lawyers, demanded money from him. He ended up shouldering a $70,000 repayment. But you can't control what people will say. Rumors spread easily that he had an affair with his brother's wife and even followed her to Hawaii. Friends began to distance themselves. Even at work, the rumors got around. He got transferred from his high-performance sales team to a basement document storage area. It's been a year now, and I'm still on good terms with my in-laws. Just the other day, while looking through a school backpack catalog with my soon-to-be elementary school daughter, she said, "Grandma will buy it for you." No, Grandpa will buy it. It'll be a lasting joke that the room went silent when Tina said, "Let's settle this with a gymnastics competition." Something feels off. I try to pinch my cheeks to ward off the sudden wave of sleepiness, but it's utterly ineffective. There wasn't anything particularly exhausting about today, just a meal at my in-laws. And I'm not usually short on sleep. Why then, I wondered drowsily, when I hear my husband's laughter. Good night, LOL. I'll make sure you have sweet dreams. My name is Lila, a 24-year-old office worker, newly married to Riley, who is 5 years my senior. We met through a friend and, after dating for 2 years, were happily married. We had a grand wedding recently and received blessings from many people. Just as I was dreaming about our happy married life ahead, an unexpected misfortune struck. Emerson, my mother-in-law, suddenly fell ill and passed away in no time. Emerson was cheerful and very kind, delighted when I first went to greet her. Nice to meet you, I'm Lila. Oh, what a joy to have such a lovely woman as my son's wife. I've always dreamed of having tea time with my son's wife. I'd be delighted. Please, let's have tea time together. Though I was nervous, Emerson welcomed me with a full smile, making me feel at ease and fond of her. We had planned to have tea time together after the wedding settled down, but that dream was shattered with Emerson's passing. We were busy with Emerson's funeral, sorting out her belongings, and handling the inheritance, finally settling down a year later. Then, I got a call from Trevor, my father-in-law. Layla, how about a meal at our house next weekend night? I'm thinking of ordering takeout. Yes, of course. Thank you. So, I was invited to dine with Trevor next weekend night, along with Riley. Trevor ordered Singaporean cuisine, which he loves, and we enjoyed the feast. The three of us gathered around the dining table. It was my first time trying Singaporean cuisine, and everything was delicious. Except, the soup tasted oddly. Curious, I asked my husband. Hey Riley, doesn't this soup taste a bit strange? That's just how this dish is. You're not used to Singaporean cuisine, haha. Though Riley laughed it off, I couldn't stomach the soup, so I avoided it and ate the other dishes. Then, I felt Trevor's sharp gaze. Lila, I went through the trouble of ordering this, so make sure you drink the soup. Startled by Trevor's outburst, I hurriedly gulped down the soup. It still tasted weird. The strange taste spread throughout my mouth, and I tried to cleanse my palate with water and other dishes. Gradually, my vision blurred, and I found myself slumping over the table. What's happening? I'm incredibly sleepy. This isn't good, I'll really fall asleep. I need to stay awake. As my consciousness faded, I could hear Riley's laughter. It seems to have worked. Dad, is that thing ready? Of course, it's all set. It's in the dresser drawer in the bedroom. The new ones are amazing, only 0.01 millimeters thick. We didn't have those when I was young. Realizing Riley and Trevor were discussing contraceptives, I felt a sense of danger but then lost consciousness completely. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. What happened? I murmured groggily. Oh, thank goodness. You're awake. Looking towards the voice, there was our neighbor, Luella. Luella immediately called the doctor, who explained that I had been given a large dose of sleeping pills. Sleeping pills! So that's why the soup tasted so odd. Then, I learned from Luella. Your dad and husband ran off in the car, so I accompanied you in the ambulance. I'm so glad you woke up safely. Really? Thank you so much. I'm sorry for the trouble. But, what do you mean Dad and my husband fled in a car? Actually, Luella found out that the fire alarm was ringing at my in-laws' house and it wouldn't stop, so she decided to check on them. When she rang the doorbell, Trevor came out. Yes. What's going on, ringing the fire alarm like this? It's been going off for so long. Haven't you found the source yet? This is serious. I'm coming in. Please, it's okay. Don't come into the house. What are you talking about? We're supposed to help each other out in times of need. Luella said that, barging into the house, and found me lying listlessly in the living room. Oh my! You've collapsed from inhaling smoke. This is terrible. I need to call an ambulance right away. No, this is different. Trevor and my husband tried to deny it hastily, but Luella was convinced I had collapsed from smoke inhalation and called for emergency and fire services on the spot. Lila is just sleeping. That's right. My wife is just tired and sleeping. There's nothing to worry about. Despite their desperate explanations, Luella objected. It's strange that she won't wake up with such a loud noise going on. I'm worried. I wonder if the ambulance will arrive soon. Luella was frantic. Before we knew it, people had started gathering. Riley and Trevor began to sweat profusely. Soon after, Riley and Trevor hurriedly jumped into a car and fled, leaving me behind. That's why Luella ended up accompanying me in the ambulance. Such a thing. Thank you so much. I expressed my gratitude to Luella. Then, when I told the doctor about the conversation I heard between Riley and Trevor before losing consciousness, he grimaced and made a call, and I was informed that Riley and Trevor were also admitted to the same hospital. Riley and Dad are hospitalized. Why? Apparently, after fleeing the house in the car, Riley and Trevor were driving frantically to get as far away as possible. As a result, the car Riley was driving crashed into the wall of a mansion, causing an accident. Both were brought to this hospital by ambulance, severely injured with broken bones, but their lives were not in danger. Hearing the reason for their admission, I was overwhelmed with anger, disgust, and various other emotions. They got what they deserved. I'll never forgive them. I decided to hire a lawyer and sue over this incident. Then, sleeping pills were detected in the soup bowl I had finished, and Riley and Trevor were arrested for assault. The news even reported on the incident. Later, during the police investigation, they were rearrested for attempted rape. Trevor was stressed from being busy with Emerson's funeral and other matters, becoming frustrated. He was planning to visit a nightclub, but when Riley found out, he made a proposition to Trevor. Dad, if you're that frustrated, I can lend you Lila. But in return, give me Mom's kimonos. Really? I'd be thrilled to be with young Lila, but... Why Mom's kimonos? Are you running out of money? Yeah, I kinda blew through my savings. Riley had squandered his savings on gambling and offered me in exchange for Emerson's kimonos, which came from a distinguished family and were valuable. Riley knew this and proposed the trade to Trevor. Lila doesn't know I'm hooked on gambling. I've used quite a bit from our joint savings account, so I want to cover it up before she finds out. I see. But I can't imagine Lila agreeing to be with me. That's okay. I have a good idea. You still have some of Mom's sleeping pills, right? Emerson had been prescribed sleeping pills for her insomnia before she passed away. With those sleeping pills remaining, Riley and Trevor concocted their plan. They decided to dissolve powdered sleeping pills in the soup and proceed after I had fallen asleep. Perfect plan, right? This way I get money, and Dad's frustration is relieved. It's all good. Right. Let's invite Lila over for a dinner party next weekend. However, their scheme was abruptly foiled by the ringing of the fire alarm, leading to the foolish outcome of causing an accident in their haste to flee in the car. It turns out Riley and Trevor are hospitalized in the same room. Damn it! How did it come to this? It was supposed to be a perfect plan. If only the fire alarm hadn't gone off. In the end, we couldn't do anything with Lila and ended up getting seriously injured. What a mess. Damn it! As they openly wept and voiced their grievances, a nurse visiting their room informed them with displeasure. I had demanded compensation through a lawyer in the divorce proceedings, but both of them flatly refused to pay any settlement for the divorce. To demand compensation from me, her husband, in a divorce trial. Nothing actually happened, so it should be fine. That's right! In the end, all we did was give Lila sleeping pills and nothing else. Both their reasoning left me and my lawyer utterly dumbfounded. Even when told that administering sleeping pills without consent is unacceptable, they wouldn't listen at all. Moreover, "Hey, Lila, tell the police not to sue me and Dad. If the victim asks for a non-prosecution, the police won't sue, right?" They had the audacity to command. How low could they possibly be? I continued to ignore them, but they persistently demanded not to sue and to ask for a lighter sentence. However, their demands suddenly stopped at one point. After giving orders every day, it was strange for them to suddenly cease. Curious, I decided to investigate. It turns out, they had encountered a serious problem. The owner of the mansion whose wall was destroyed when Riley and Trevor crashed into it was furious and had demanded they pay for the repairs. The damage was extensive, so the cost of repairs was significant. Moreover, my husband had lied, saying, "We were rushing to the hospital because Dad was suffering from an illness, and that led to the driving mistake." However, the incident was reported in the news. Upon learning the truth, the mansion owner became even more enraged and insisted on receiving both the repair costs and compensation from the divorce trial. As a result, Riley and Trevor seemed to have bigger problems than just dealing with me. "It wasn't on purpose. Please forgive us. We beg you." Riley and Trevor were pleading, but the mansion owner was unforgiving. They were told they must pay no matter what. Since the mansion owner hired a lawyer, Riley and Trevor also had to hire one to handle the situation. Since I had a lawyer as well, the compensation for the divorce was smoothly negotiated between the lawyers. Given their clear wrongdoing, our demands were almost fully met. I also demanded and received the money Riley had misappropriated from our joint savings account. Although I hadn't noticed his gambling addiction, I remembered how his overtime had suddenly increased at one point. Probably, he was lying about working late and going to pachinko instead. And so, I naturally proceeded with the divorce from Riley. The negotiations were handled by our lawyers, and though initially reluctant, Riley agreed to the divorce when I firmly insisted. Riley's lawyer played a significant role by convincing them that they were in a very unfavorable position and needed to show sincerity. Later, I went to thank our neighbor Luella again. "Thank you so much. I don't know how to express my gratitude." "Oh, I didn't do anything special. It's good that you're safe. Perhaps Emerson was looking out for you." "Emerson, you say? What do you mean?" After I was taken to the hospital in an ambulance, the firefighters came and checked the cause of the fire alarm. However, the only source of fire in the house was a candle on Emerson's altar, which no one should have lit. This wasn't enough to trigger the fire alarm, indicating a possible malfunction as there were no other signs of fire. "Maybe Emerson is always watching over you? She was so happy to have such a lovely daughter-in-law," Luella told me with a smile. It might have been a coincidence, but even so, I felt a warmth thinking about Emerson's kind smile. After expressing my thanks to Luella again, I headed to a certain cake shop. This shop sells a chocolate cake that I've always loved. When I had promised to have tea time with Emerson, I wanted her to try the chocolate from this cake shop. After buying sweet buns, I went to the florist to buy flowers that matched Emerson's cheerful image, with a fresh impression, and headed to visit her grave. Offering the flowers and chocolate at the grave, I expressed my gratitude to Emerson. "Dear Emerson, thank you so much. Your help saved me. Though I've divorced Riley, I will always love you, Mom." I wished I could have talked more with Emerson. I wanted to have that tea party. "This chocolate was meant to be shared with you, Emerson, during our tea time. It's really delicious." Just then, the wind blew softly. Feeling as if Emerson had responded, a tear fell from my eye. But thinking that crying would worry Emerson, I lifted my face, smiled, and said, "I'll visit again, Emerson," and moved on. I decided to take the chocolate back with me later, as I couldn't leave it at the grave. On the way home, I felt incredibly refreshed. Despite everything, I vowed to live energetically from tomorrow on. Returning to single life, I threw myself into work more than ever before. Riley and Trevor, with their complex fractures, seem to still be in the hospital. The owner of the mansion is trying to collect the repair costs before they are discharged and sent to prison, and it seems they had to sell their car and belongings to pay back the money using their savings. Physically and mentally devastated, and with prison time awaiting them. They are experiencing a living hell. I hope they reflect deeply and pay for their crimes once they are discharged and sent to prison. Since then, I've been visiting Emerson's grave regularly, updating her on my life. Having had enough of love for a while, I've decided to enjoy being single and am studying hard to earn new qualifications. I plan to live every day without regrets. My husband called me disgusting for my severe morning sickness, looking down on me with cold eyes. "You're the one who threw up and made a mess, right? Hurry up and open the window to air it out. If the smell sticks, you're paying for it. Just because you find it hard to go shopping or cook doesn't mean morning sickness isn't an illness. Don't be so stupid." On top of that, as my morning sickness got worse, my husband left me at home and went on an overseas trip with mother-in-law, Audrina. That was the last straw for me, and I began to plot my revenge. A week later, my husband called, furious. I laughed it off. "Since you told me to clean the house, I did just as you said. Got a problem with that?" I'm Kimberly, a 28-year-old office worker. My husband, Eamon, and I live in a detached house and both work while we've recently become pregnant. While I was happy, my morning sickness was so severe that I couldn't go to work on some days. Fortunately, many at my workplace were understanding. "Once you get through this, it'll get easier, so make sure to rest and take care of yourself." They gave me some time off when I was considering quitting. So, I spent my days at home, resting as much as possible, eating when I could, and doing household chores. The problem was my husband. He practically stopped doing any housework at all. "You're always at home, right? Even a pregnant woman can clean, so at least do that." While my husband used to do household chores when we were both working, he stopped doing anything since I took my leave. Even when I said I couldn't do it because of severe nausea, he wouldn't listen. Moreover, he compared me to other pregnant women he had seen, saying, "Just being lazy and slacking off in the name of morning sickness." Furthermore, he was extremely averse to me vomiting. The first time I vomited at home, I didn't make it to the toilet and ended up using the living room trash can. Seeing this, my husband, pinching his nose, hurried me to ventilate the room and kept yelling at me, even though my nausea hadn't subsided. Although I vomited into a plastic bag in the trash can, so the can itself wasn't dirty, he made me dispose of the bag and then threw the trash can away. "Hey, what's with that attitude? Why are you telling me to open a window when I'm vomiting? You could open it yourself. And I properly sealed the double bag before throwing it away, so why throw out the trash can in front of me as if to make a point?" Disgusting, smelly, don't talk. Even if it's in a plastic bag, droplets might have gotten on the trash can. After that, no matter what I said, "Don't talk because it's smelly," he wouldn't even listen. I started to consider divorce. Maybe once my morning sickness settled down and I could go back to work, my husband would return to being the kind and helpful person he used to be. But could a husband who hurled such abuse at me while I was suffering return to how he was? Or was this his true nature? As I worried, my morning sickness only got worse. With nausea hitting me multiple times a day, I started carrying a plastic bag with me everywhere in the house to vomit without my husband seeing and dispose of it. However, one time, I didn't manage to dispose of it in time, and he saw me with the bag. "Don't touch anything, all right? You're paying for the sofa you just sat on since you're going to dispose of it because you dirted it." He looked at me with utter disgust. When I impulsively brought up divorce, I noticed he was holding a pamphlet in his hand. He spread it out to show me. "In about 2 weeks, I'm going on a trip overseas with Mom. We plan to stay for about a week. Don't slack off on cleaning just because I'm not here. Keep the house clean." "What? What are you thinking?" While looking at me coldly, my husband laughed in a low voice. "I don't want to stay in a house you've made filthy. The morning sickness should settle down in about 3 weeks, right? By the time I'm back from the trip, it should be nearly over, so clean the house in the meantime." "Fine. I'll give the house a thorough cleaning." The next 2 weeks were tough for me. He doubled down on doing nothing, even eating strongly scented meals or spraying harsh perfume around the room despite my pleas because it made me nauseous. Despite locking me in the bathroom, he'd bang on the door furiously and yell if he wanted to use it himself. This lifestyle continued. I immediately informed my parents that I had decided on divorce. Since my husband's attitude changed, I had been discussing it with my parents, who must have realized from my words that convincing me otherwise was no longer possible. They told me to come back home immediately. However, just divorcing and returning to my parents' home wasn't enough for me. I was determined to teach my husband, who lacked any awareness of being a father and thought nothing of the individual differences in pregnancy and morning sickness, a lesson. 2 weeks later, I saw my husband off with a large carry-on bag. These 2 weeks were the peak of my morning sickness, and I had lost more than 2 kilos. If it continued like this, I would end up hospitalized due to severe pregnancy sickness. Seeing me visibly thinner, my husband still called me dirty and, after repeatedly ordering me to clean the house, fled like he was escaping. I stayed at the entrance until he was out of sight, then took a deep breath and made a phone call. A week later, I was leisurely sitting in my parents' living room when calls from my husband kept coming in. Calls from my husband kept coming in one after another. After watching for a while, my parents started to panic, so I reluctantly answered. "Don't mess with me, what the hell is this? Explain." I instinctively moved my smartphone away from my ear at the sound of my husband's loud voice the moment the call connected. Still, I sighed at the loud enough voice and listened to him. "I can't get into the house, what's going on? Don't change the locks on me while I'm away." "Ah, the real estate agent changed them. It's kind of gross to have the same keys as the previous tenant for the next one, right? So, they changed the locks when selling the house." "Huh? Real estate agent? Oh, didn't you see the sign? It's right there next to it, for sale." There was silence on the phone for a while before the angry voice came again. "What are you doing on your own? Who gave you permission to sell it? Why are you selling it? You said the whole house smells. So, I cleaned the entire house, including that. And why would I need anyone's permission to sell my house?" "Your house? That's not right, that house belongs to your grandfather. It's a crime to sell it without being the title holder." "That house was given to me, I remodeled it, and it's in my name. You can't just sell it if you're not the title holder." Indeed, the house we lived in belonged to my grandfather. However, after my grandfather passed away, I, still single, remodeled it into its current form, and after getting married, my husband moved in to live together. My husband was momentarily speechless knowing the title was in my name, but quickly changed his approach. "That house is where I live too. You can't just kick out a resident like that. It's illegal to sell my stuff. Besides, it was our house since we lived there as a couple, so it's not just your house anymore. Unfortunately, that house was in my name before we got married. We never changed it to a joint title after marriage. Plus, I moved all the stuff out after, so your things are all safe. I did dispose of the sofa you said was smelly, though." My husband seemed panicked by the mention of moving out his belongings. He was asking where and when. "It's at your grandmother's house. After all, you're away with Dad gone and no siblings. There was nowhere else to send it but your grandmother's when you went overseas with Audrina." Hearing his belongings were at his kind grandmother's house seemed to calm my husband for a moment, but his voice quickly filled with anger again. "So, you're the kind of woman who sells the house and dumps the belongings while her husband is on a trip. I'm divorcing you. I'll sue for compensation in the divorce court because of this. It's a relief you're the one bringing up divorce. I don't want you to come to the house anymore, and I'll be heading there with my lawyer soon. So, goodbye." I wonder if my husband truly believed he could win if he took it to court. I calmed my panicking parents while contacting a lawyer. A week later, when I went to what my husband calls his in-laws' house, Audrina slapped me before I even entered the door. I had expected it and deliberately received the slap. "Because of you, the house is a mess. A woman who can't even do housework because of a little morning sickness is useless. Pay the compensation in the divorce court and let's divorce." As I was rubbing my stinging cheek, planning to retort to Audrina, she saw someone behind me and her face twisted. "I thought you showed no remorse, but to strike immediately upon meeting is something else." Behind me was Carol, my husband's grandmother, looking furious. "Hello. I'm really sorry for sending the belongings over so suddenly the other day. That's all right. If it hadn't been for that, I wouldn't have noticed at all." I had come to the in-laws' house, which was now the home of my husband's grandmother who had kindly accepted his belongings. When I sent my husband's belongings, I included a letter of apology, detailing everything about our situation. As a result, the grandmother was furious with her grandson's husband for hurling terrible words at his wife suffering from morning sickness and leaving her to fend for herself. She was equally furious at Audrina for going on an overseas trip with him without admonishing such behavior. The grandmother, now 80 years old, is a gentle figure to her grandson but a disagreeable mother-in-law to Audrina. Since Audrina married into the family, her relationship with the grandmother, due to their clashing personalities, has always been like cats and dogs. Sure enough, Audrina, upon suddenly facing the grandmother, twisted her face in obvious annoyance, which only fueled the grandmother's anger further. After briefly addressing the shouting match between the two, I entered the house. There, my husband stood, dumbfounded next to the grandmother and Audrina. It might have been shocking for my husband to see his kind grandmother and mother arguing so fiercely. However, wanting to discuss matters with my husband without Audrina's interference, I had informed the grandmother of my visit in advance. And we started the divorce negotiation with my lawyer before Audrina could return. The process didn't take much time and ended smoothly. The compensation amount my husband had prepared for the divorce court and its basis were systematically dismantled by my lawyer, leaving him speechless. After a thorough division of assets and agreeing not to approach me except when visiting our child after its birth, my husband readily agreed, and our marriage ended abruptly. As I was leaving the house, the grandmother and Audrina were still standing next to each other. I addressed them briefly before departing, but they seemed too heated in their argument to pay me any mind. Subsequently, I began receiving a barrage of complaint-like emails from my ex-husband. Apparently, he became annoyed with the grandmother coming to the in-laws' house and meddling. Imagining my former husband and Audrina, who had shouted at me so boldly, becoming meek in front of a petite grandmother, finally brought me to laughter. However, the nature of my ex-husband's emails soon shifted towards seeking reconciliation. Every day there's shouting. They both ask me what I think when they're fighting, dragging me into it, and it's annoying. It's a lifetime request. Please, let me stay at your place. I'll do household chores or anything. I won't do anything terrible again, and I'll never say it. I want to meet our coming child too. I love you. I want to remarry you. I responded mechanically. I will not reconcile. As for the child, you can meet if you pay child support. And left it at that. Eventually, the messages from my ex-husband ceased. Apparently, unable to bear the living conditions, he left Audrina and went somewhere. Not providing any support, Audrina, not yet of pensionable age, is scraping by on her savings. Audrina herself contacted me with this news. No one's helping me. Please, I want to stay at your place. I only went on the trip with my son because he invited me. I had no idea you were suffering so much from morning sickness. She claimed, lining up convenient excuses over the phone, but when I threatened to report her to the police, the calls stopped. Apparently, the grandmother also refused to help, and Audrina, limited by her savings, began working part-time. Thus, she no longer had the energy to call or email me. However, the altercation between the grandmother and Audrina that day is well known throughout the neighborhood, and they saw me deliberately receiving Audrina's slap. Consequently, the neighbors have distanced themselves from Audrina, leaving her to live uncomfortably in her home. Seemingly unable to afford renting a new apartment, she spends her days diminishing in stature. Yet, living alone in a rent-free house should be manageable on a part-time income. My morning sickness has finally subsided, and I no longer vomit. The doctor, learning of my divorce and the circumstances around it, scolded me for accumulating too much stress, which wouldn't help in healing. Though I had been consulting with my family, the stress from living with an uncooperative ex-husband for a while, and dealing with real estate agents online to sell the house, had been too much on my body, and I reflected on this. Moving forward, I plan to avoid stress and return to work. Anyway, I'll be taking maternity leave before giving birth, planning to live at my parents' house. Now, imagining the appearance of my unborn child brings me immense joy. As the days go by, my anticipation grows, and I can hardly wait to see what kind of child will be born. No matter what, I intend to raise my child with love.